Thank you, Ashish. Before I start, may I ask what's the profile of people here? Are you guys product people? Are you trying to get into product management? Are you engineers? Are you business folks?
Engineer will be the best.
So almost everybody is an engineer. Perfect. I recall some 2-3 weeks ago, Ashish wrote to me an email saying, "Hey, do you want to come down?" And I was wondering what value am I going to add? And then for a couple of hours, I did not respond back to him. And I thought about it. What value do I add? And then I realized that even in my own case, half of my professional journey has been figuring out how much tech should a PM know. I do come from some fascinating background. I graduated from NIFT, if you know what NIFT is. I studied production there. I was sort of trained to build factories, build assembly lines and break operations into pieces and so on and so forth. And I think the key thread to my career has been curiosity. And then the way we'll take this conversation forward is, it's my own journey at some middle end of the conversation where I figured out how much tech should a PM know, or have some glimpse of it, and how much he should definitely not know. And my conversation is somewhat very similar to what Chandra said, and then somewhat very, very different from what Chandra said. So to start with, getting into product management in the first place is challenging, to say the least. If you're a marketing person, or let's say if you're an engineer, there are set ways in which we think, in which we perceive the world. If you come from some other, let's say, data background and so on and so forth, so we all look at world in a very different way. Whereas product management, if we talk about pure product management, not job roles that are masquerading behind the job role of a product manager, people who are doing project management and call themselves a PM, or at least given titles and so on and so forth. But if you look at core of product management, why this function was built in the first place, it was built for three things. One key role was that what should one build? What's the problem? The second challenge was whether that problem in itself is big enough for you to be interested in commercially, and then go and find people who will solve that problem for you in a way that you believe may be a feasible solution. But then things happen. You have technical PMs, you have non-technical PMs, blah 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 blah. But the context of this conversation rather is the what part of product management. So I started somewhere in 2014. After graduation, I went to work with a company called Decathlon, if you know, where I did some project on taxation and tax and logistics analysis. It was a fascinating project. Then in a sequence of events, I just got so curious about human-computer interaction, if you may have heard of this term, that I said, I'll go and do this. Then I prepared myself for this role. Then I realized what challenges were there for a human-computer interaction researcher, and whether the work in itself was meaningful or not. And then I said, okay, if need be, I'll get into product management myself. Into the role, I realized that it's a challenging role per se, but very fulfilling. And then all those learnings behind, we started Fasal. And it's like confused, very confused, to figuring out what to do and what not to do. So when I started at Decathlon, my job role was to figure out the impact of taxation and logistics on product cost. And it was a very challenging project per se, because I had zero understanding of taxes. So in a short period of time, I had to build a lot of information libraries in terms of how taxes work, how the regime works, and what is GST and why it is useful, and how many state taxes are there, octroi taxes are there, and so on and so forth. And the research was fascinating. I mean, it just opened up doors for you to see a world in a very different way. The joke is the moment you are born, you start paying taxes because the needle through which you are injected has taxes on it. I think for about 6-8 months there was rigorous amount of research, trying to figure out the impact and how can we reduce the cost on the products, and then how can we pass it on to consumers. So Decathlon's mission, which is a very noble mission, is to sort of provide the benefits of sports for all. And then if you say all, then you have to figure out the pricing point of it as well. After about 6-8 months, we summed that up, research up in a mobile app. And then the idea was an Android app, if I would say so. And the idea was that it should be available to people in context. So Decathlon is a large organization. People are constantly traveling here and there and in their factories and so on and so forth. And the idea was that through an application, they would have this information accessible at any point in time. And then I remember there was a presentation which I had to make where a lot of people from a lot of departments came. I came from here from Gurgaon to here. And I gave the presentation, and I recall it was a full room and everybody stood up and clapped. And I thought, wow, I have actually made an impact here. And everybody congratulated and said, super, blah, 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 blah. And 1 month down the line, somebody told me nobody actually understood what you were talking about. And they clapped because the delivery of the presentation was very good. And then realized that for 7-8 months you've been working and you presented something which is of no use because the information was presented in a way that they don't even understand. And then that's where the term HCI came into a picture from somewhere I don't recall, of how we presented, how the UI of that app was, if I would put it this way. And whether it was built in a way keeping in mind the diversity of people who are going to consume information from it. So when we were making the app, we were making the app for ourselves. You'll come across this term a lot. When you don't research, when you don't know who is your audience, you just make things for yourself. You believe the problem that you are facing is everybody's problem, and then you build stuff for yourself and hope that everybody is going to use it. But that does not happen. I even got a couple of awards for that project, but the bottom line is that project went into dustbin. After doing a lot of research on human-computer interaction, I realized that for any information that you present to somebody, there are some cognitive steps to it. For example, I am putting the conversation or the information at a time where it is useful to you. So if I talk about, talk about some random topic which is of no use to you, it wouldn't be interesting. If we were in a party, assume, and I come and talk to you about product management, it wouldn't work because the moods are different. So the first thing was context. The second thing was whether the audience has the required cognitive ability to consume what you are presenting. The third point is whether you are presenting it in a way that they can consume it. And the fourth thing is whether the information is, what's the quality of that information? Whether it is easy enough for them to consume because it has been put in the format that they understand, or it's presented in a different way. So there were various layers in which information is consumed. And then I said, okay, this is fascinating. If I get a chance to do this again, maybe do some nice research and present information to people in which it would be useful to them, I think that will be a fascinating job role. That's where I sort of moved to a company which was doing a lot of UX stuff. Really good company. I cannot name them, but they'll do a lot of really good stuff. I prepared for some time trying to understand what is research and how do you conduct it and what are the consequences of bias and how do you write a questionnaire and how do you talk to people, how do you not sort of corrupt the sample set, what is a sample set in the first place. And then the idea was that, by the way, how many of you here know what is user research? All right. At least some people do. So user research is nothing but getting into the context of people and trying to understand them and see if there is a problem that they are facing, or a problem that they are facing, you're trying to validate it. It's a very um, it's a mix of quantitative and qualitative research where you build a hypothesis, you go and validate it through meeting people, through various research methodologies, maybe a survey, maybe an in-context interview, maybe random interviews, and so on and so forth. And it's a fascinating subject because the moment I said no, that we build product for ourselves, we actually build products for ourselves until unless we have gone out and tested it or validated the problem in the first place. So the first company that I worked with is a big telecom software company. They make softwares for telecom companies. It's a B2B SaaS company. And the product was a PCRF. PCRF is where you make all these data plans. So the product that they made would work like this. It was expected that the marketing managers would be able to make plans on the go and release them. It was a very competitive scenario. But the problem was that they needed another technical guy to sit there, understand from the marketing manager what he wants, and then it took 7 days to bring that plan out. So what was expected versus what the product was doing were two very, very different things. And then I went on to do research with numerous people, numerous marketing managers in terms of what they are looking for, how they think, what do they want, in what kind of hurry they are, and so on and so forth. And after months of research, we made a presentation and a report, and we gave it to the team over there. And that's where the Hatyakand happened. Again, nobody understood what we were talking about. And why they did not understand was what we were proposing there in terms of the improvement on the platform or the product. Half of the answers was this thing cannot be technically done. What we were looking, the point of view with which we were looking at that platform was that it should be user friendly. It should solve a problem. At the same time, there was another context to it. And the context was whether it can be built or not in the first place. All things said and done, the user research was useful to them in one way or another. They did make a lot of changes on the product, and the product was in way better shape than it was initially. Then I went ahead and did my second project. It was with a big data company. They have tools for metadata management and so on and so forth. And same task, researching with the users, what do they want, what is the expectation from the system, what's the problem in the first place, what's their ability to consume in terms of the interface, the information, and so on and so forth. But this time, the situation was a little different. This time, my point of contact was somebody who was a product manager who had good understanding of technology, good understanding of people, and very good understanding of the context of the business. So every time we would do a research, come up with something, he would ask very fair questions in terms of what can be built, what cannot be built, what do you go and tell people, what were the questions, and so on and so forth. And over the next 2-3 months, we really made some phenomenal changes in the product, and it sort of flew. It hit virality in one way or another because it was solving problem, and it was solving problem in the way that people were expecting. And then the learning was that if you talk about a digital product, no, it's not the code, it's not the UX, it's not the business, it's not the operations, but the circle of it which runs it. So if you're building a product which is digital in nature, you need to have understanding and context of all of it. And then at the same time, if I am going and telling somebody that this is what needs to be done, there are two critical things to it. Whether they understand why I am saying what I am saying. Second, whether I have the ways of conversation in which I can convince you that, and the reasoning that what I am saying is worthwhile, or what Chandra was mentioning. Whether if you go to your devs and say that this is what you need to do versus go and tell them that this is why it is needed in the first place. And if we do this, this is what we'll achieve. Your work is meaningful. So it suddenly changes the context. So the realization was that if if you want to get into product management or you want to be a part of teams which are building digital product, you need to understand that everybody has different context, and you need to understand everybody's context, have empathy with everyone, and then speak to them in the language they understand, try and make them understand what we want to do. That's where I think I started reading about technology in the first place. What's a stack, what's front end, what's back end, what's Redis, what's SQL, non-SQL, and so on and so forth. And the idea was that I should be able to communicate well. The point was, I know there is a problem, I have validated the problem, now somebody needs to build a solution to it. I do have a fair assumption of what a product may look like. Now, if I go and talk to you about the product, you should understand what I'm talking about. And I remember on one of those days, somebody told me that there's this fascinating joke about devs. And the joke was, there was a small little boy who was standing at the terrace, and then he said, the father downstairs said, throw me the bucket. The bucket had some water, and he threw the water to him. So the father said, you should have emptied the bucket, threw the water somewhere, and then thrown me the bucket, right? How is your mind working? So the uncle from behind says, he's going to be a developer. So it was a phenomenal joke for a lot of reasons. You have to understand what development teams do, what they think, how they think in the first place, for you to make sense of the way they behave, or why do they behave the way they behave, and so on and so forth. So if you do not know their language, you are talking to somebody you don't even understand. How do you expect them to understand you? And then one of the key projects that I did there was with one of the largest banks here in India. We were working on a strategy where in long term there would be no retail banks. All you do is everything that you do in a retail bank or your close by bank branch, you should be able to do it from your cell phone only. It was a very, very fascinating project. Lot of research, in terms of understanding the behavior of people. What do they want? When do they want? Why do they do? What do they do? What apps they use in terms of understanding the interface and so on and so forth. Can we actually build a scalable solution which can have lakhs of concurrent requests and then still have the kind of security that banks look for? It was a very fascinating project, and the team that we were working with had people who understand technology, had people who understand business, had people who were bridge between both of them, had people, all kinds of people. It was a very good mix of people where you have all the context in the world. The end conclusion was that it became something very big. If you would hear about that app, I can't name it, but it's a very respectable banking app in the ecosystem. And the realization then was that for you to figure out or solve a problem digitally, there is an ecosystem interaction in terms of, market, in terms of technology, in terms of people, and so on and so forth. For you to be at the center of the problem, you need to understand everybody. Until or unless you understand everybody, you will not be able to get this problem solved the way you want. After that, I had enough experience in terms of figuring out problems, researching problems, figuring out what could be a feasible solution, and then figuring out how to get it done. And that's where I made a switch to a company which was building HR tech, B2B HR tech product from ground up. And the idea was that you should be able to figure out if people are engaged or not. And then you should be able to figure out if they are not engaged, why they are not engaged. And then you should be able to figure out what's the feasible solution. It may sound very simple, but it was a very complicated problem to solve. From the point of view that how will you figure out somebody is engaged or not, whether you like your company or not. How much do you hate your company? Why do you hate your company? And so on and so forth. It's a fascinating problem to solve, but very, very challenging in terms of technology. And in terms of even conceptually, it was a challenging problem. I made a switch from UX research. I went into product management. I was leading product management over there. And that was the first time when I was exposed to multiple teams. Everybody wants a piece of your pie. Everybody wants a piece of your time. Everybody wants to do meaningful work, if I would put it this way. And everybody wants clarity. So I think some question was there when Chandra was asked whether you should go and tell the devs what is the business context of something or not. So I think people are more engaged into their work when they know their work is meaningful. So I think till the point there is sensitive information. Apart from that, I think people should talk. Teams should talk. The more they talk, the more relationship depth is there, the better the working of the team becomes. Now, the fascinating thing was, because I was exposed to a technology team where I had to give them requirements, we used to have these requirements meeting where people would come and ask very random questions. And sometimes they used to sound very stupid, but they were not. They may sounded stupid from my point of view, but they were very legitimate questions if you put it in their perspective. How many times the data should be pulled? As many times as needed. Whether there is a limit to it, I don't know. But after getting exposed to the team which was working on development, there were a lot of learnings. One learning was that as a product manager, you have to know technology. You cannot work with a technology, with a technology product company without knowing what tech is. The reason is that as a product manager, what you are doing or what your role is this. I would come and talk to my team about a problem that we are going to solve. And I don't use, mostly I don't use terms like shipping and this and that for a specific reason. That if you look at the framework of things, as a product manager, you are responsible to figure out a problem which your customers are facing, whether it is in B2B domain or B2C domain. In the B2B domain, it may be very challenging because people say something versus they mean something versus they want something. So you never know. In B2C, you may have data, but data which is purely numbers is more validation of your own hypothesis of things versus telling you something. So you have the responsibility of figuring out what to do. Now, once you have figured out what to do, you need to take help from people who will tell you how to solve it. Maybe your UX designer or your UI designer who will sort of help you in understanding how things should work in a way that people like it. Then you need to go to your technology team and tell them that this is what you need to build, and then sit with them and understand. Chandra was discussing about bluff. One of the things that I used to face was, if somebody says they are going to take 3 days, how did they come up with this estimation? When I know if I don't ship on the second day, there will be some damage. So there could be two things going on here. One is that they are really being very honest, and second, they are not being honest. People are people, they come with their own set of problems. You can challenge an assumption or you can challenge a deadline when you know what's going behind it. What if you don't know? So the first reason why you should actually know tech is that you need to understand when this problem is going to get solved and when it is going in the hands of your customer. The second thing is, if you look at this entire ecosystem of events, you will realize that figuring out the problem, solving the problem, putting it on paper is one thing, actually building it and then shipping it is another. So in your kingdom of product ecosystem, the magicians are the developers. So if they are the magicians, how do you figure out to best utilize them? How do you know that out of these 5 people, this person will be able to solve this problem in 2 days versus 3 days, and who is reliable at what point in time? Who should this work be given to? Second thing, third thing is, if you're building a digital product, if you go and talk to people and they ask you how is this functioning and you can't even answer that, that's another challenge. So there were a lot of learnings that sort of went in with that job. It took me about 6 odd months to figure out that until and unless I know what is happening behind the code, I know what server is being used, why it is being used, what APIs we are using, what frameworks we are using, what language we are writing in, and so on and so forth, you will never have understanding of the product that you have built in the first place. So what I did was that I went ahead and learned as much as I could. And there was another question of how much tech is too much tech. I think the example is till the point you let developers do their job and you are doing your job. That's the point where you should stop it. Don't go and teach a developer that this is the framework we should use. Don't go and teach a developer that let's pick this DB versus that one. Don't go and teach him his job. Your job is to figure out a problem, give it to him to solve, till the point you have the necessary skills to sort of converse and understand what's going on, you're good to go. So as a PM, who you are, that's a better question to ask versus how much tech should one know, or how much UX design should one know, or how much should one know in terms of marketing or data analysis. If you are a product manager, no, you are at the junction of the entire circle. You are the center point of it. So you should know everything. The reason is you have to talk to everybody. You have to make you are the evangelizer. So I have wondered it for quite some time that as a product manager, what's the justice to your role? And the skills that I believe that work is, one, you should be a very good behavioral scientist. You should understand what is happening. You should understand why it is happening. And it cannot be in silos that in terms of your customers, you understand what is happening and why it is happening, and for your dev team, you don't. So you have to develop that ability and then sort of empathy that you should be able to understand people. All you're building is for people, right? So the first piece to it is you must be very, very good in terms of understanding people's behavior. That's point number one. If you're a good behavioral scientist, or if you at least have understanding of how people behave, you will certainly figure out what is happening, what is not happening. So for example, I want a taxi. Now, the one way in which it was happening before disruption happened was that I would go on the road, I would call for cabs, they would stop, they would not stop, and so on and so forth. And then I would go. And now the way it happens is somebody figured out that if the demand and supply could be matched, there is a business opportunity. So the problem was that people wanted cabs, and the solution was let's make cabs available at a tip of a button. So if you're a behavioral scientist, you will have observations that will fascinate you in terms of people. Second thing is you have to be an analyst. So if you figure out that this is the sequence of events happening, you should have the ability to figure out why it is happening. So for example, we were discussing about data analysis in terms of B2C companies. Imagine your data is telling you something, you figured out that this could be a possibility, but you forgot that this could be one possibility. There are n number of other possibilities too. And now because you are a product manager who is going to solve it, you will solve it on the basis of the assumption that I understand this particular scenario. So as an analyst, you should be a very strong analyst trying to understand what is the problem and why it is happening. And can you validate it in one way or another? So be Amit Shah, try and understand what's happening, try and understand what could be the solution, and try and implement it. Very, 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 very good ability of communication. And it is required because you are talking to 7 stakeholders, out of whom at least 6 don't even understand what you're talking about. So if you're talking to a business stakeholder, he will understand that this particular feature has to be shipped because it is going to solve this problem, it is going to impact our bottom line in this way. If you go to your data analyst, he may or may not understand. If you are talking to your developer saying, if we implement this particular stack, it will take, instead of 14 days, it will take 21, but it will ensure that we don't break. If you are talking to your VP sales, no, he will not understand. So you have to be very, very, very good at figuring out a way in which everybody understands what is happening. So the three key things in which a PM must excel is: one, he should understand behavior. Behavior in terms of people, behavior in terms of data, behavior in terms of patterns, and so on and so forth. He should be able to analyze what could be and what could not be a possible reason for it. Why should we pick this problem to solve before that one? Why should these particular set of problems be put 6 months behind the line and this one should be picked right away? You should have the ability to dissect everything to its very core and then figure out what is right. Because if you go wrong, you are the person who is driving this product. So if you go wrong, that means the product is also going to get wrong. And the third thing is, please learn how to communicate complicated things in very simple manner. If you get that art right, whether it is you're talking to a developer, whether you're talking to the chief of army staff, or whether you're talking to your security guard, the kind of impact that it's going to make will remain constant. And then finally the question of how much tech should you know. And it's like this. You look at technology from a 3,000 feet point of view. You know what is happening. You understand the reasoning behind what is being done right now. You understand the limitation of why this is being done and where it is going to fail. So for example, we were having a discussion about MVP. And then I remember somebody asked a question about an MVP and what stack should be used. The task of an MVP is validate a hypothesis in as short time as one can. So the stack which allows you to ship that MVP as fast as it can is the tech stack that you are going to go after, till the point that it is representing the sample of the solution in the way that you want. And then please do not teach your tech people, please do not teach your developers their job. The moment you start doing it, there are several domino effects that happen. So for you to go and teach tech to your devs, the first thing that you'll start thinking is, you'll start looking at every problem from the point of view of technology, whether it can be solved or not. This particular framework versus that particular framework. So what it will do is, it will bias you into thinking everything from a tech point of view, whether it can be done or not. Some problems are meant to be discovered and solved later. You'll lose that. Second thing that you lose that is that you are a product manager whose expertise should be on figuring out what to do. Now you are leaving your role and then you're attempting to do somebody else's job. And then to sum it up, if I say that one needs to look at tech from a 3,000 feet above, is that you should understand everything that technology is. You should be able to talk about it. You should be able to reason out of it. But not necessary that you have the necessary skills to go and do it in the first place. So that's where you should stop. Know about tech, know about stack, know about technology, know about developments, know about Redis and everything. But till the point that you keep yourself away from developing the bias that whether this can be done in this scenario or whether this cannot be done in this scenario, you are good to go. That's me. Thank you.